The greater Atlanta area, a thriving metropolis home to over 6 million people, is the heart of Southern culture and enterprise. Atlanta, known for its diverse population, hip-hop music, and abundant entrepreneurial opportunities, is one of the most influential cities in the South. The city has lived through the industrial era, emerging as a railroad city, been burned to the ground during the Civil War, has been reborn as the center of the New South, has encompassed the civil rights movement as the home of leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., and is now entering into a new era of technological and social advancement. However, while Atlanta's city limits actually only contain 500,000 citizens, Atlanta's sprawling suburbs are what truly make Atlanta, Atlanta.
Go. Let's go. Go. It's a ball. Right here. Oh. Why shouldn't you have to be in it?
On the other side of the spectrum, Atlanta is infamously referred to as the city of suburbs, a conglomerate of Alpharetta, Buckhead, Roswell, and Decatur rather than a unified community. Atlanta's suburbs are often regarded as entirely separate from the city itself, as their wealth, size, and sprawl far exceeds anything found on Atlanta's borders. This reputation for suburban sprawl and inequality between Atlanta's poorest and wealthiest regions dates back to the history of these suburbs following World War II.
The dawn of the 20th century, African Americans in major cities lived scattered throughout the city. They weren't segregated particularly. It's only with the Great Migration of 6 to 7 million African Americans north and west escaping the South, the predominant response of the United States government and state and local governments to the Great Migration was to contain Black people in their own neighborhoods. And HUD was particularly a part of this role. With the precursors to HUD introduced and encouraged racially restrictive covenants, redlining of every major city where African Americans landed.
Welcome back to CBS Mornings. A racial discrimination lawsuit in Northern California highlights an issue that many African Americans have complained about for decades. Home values set too low when the owners are Black.
So, am I talking directly to the camera or am I talking to an interviewer? I'm talking to y'all, so I'm not looking directly.
Yeah.
Gotcha, okay. Hey, I'm Kevin Travis. I teach AP US History here at Dunwoody High School. I have lived in Dunwoody for approximately 4 years.
First, can you just give us an overview of how the suburbs were formed following World War II, like specifically in relation to racism and discrimination in Atlanta?
Following World War II, with the proliferation of the automobile, it became much easier for Americans to live a great distance from where they worked. Particularly after World War II, with the number of former soldiers, veterans, who were receiving benefits as a result of the GI Bill, they looked to buy and build homes in relatively cheap areas.
Following World War II, soldiers returned home from war in waves of thousands, immediately deciding to marry and settle down to begin their lives that had been on pause while they were at war. Laws like the GI Bill allowed soldiers to get a college education and acquire widely accessible loans for home. However, not all soldiers benefited equally. The GI Bill overwhelmingly discriminated against African American veterans as it was enforced by state governments, not the federal government. In effect, states like Georgia that had strict Jim Crow laws denied Black soldiers equal education and housing, effectively shutting many out from the suburban lifestyle and the ability to begin to accumulate the generational wealth that comes along with property ownership.
This would have been, in Atlanta specifically, this would have been about the time of the development of the areas we now kind of know as Buckhead. Now, part of this is purely economic, a desire to find cheap land to build a house on. But part of it is going to be a result of social, cultural issues as a process begins that's commonly referred to as white flight. As white middle-class Americans begin to leave neighborhoods that are desegregating in the inner city and begin to flee to the suburbs to try to maintain more homogeneous communities, at least in terms of race.
Modern Atlanta continues to cope with the results of segregation between rich and poor in overwhelmingly white and minority neighborhoods. The Atlanta suburbs have their origins in racism, and an attempt to escape the diversity of Atlanta in exchange for the rigid and uniform suburban lifestyle rooted in conformity and homogeneity.
Specifically in regards to inefficient layouts, one of the things that is typical of a suburban community are cul-de-sacs. And so cul-de-sacs are almost entirely a suburban phenomenon. You do not find them in urban neighborhoods because the entire purpose of urban areas is to make it easy to get from one place to another. Cul-de-sacs, on the other hand, are intentionally designed to isolate groups of people because the only reason you would go onto a street that is a cul-de-sac is you are traveling to one of those homes on the cul-de-sacs. So the effect of these is it limits Americans' ability to interact with people who are outside of their neighborhood, right? Because cul-de-sacs, by definition, are a dead end.
These neighborhoods, constructed to embody the value of space, isolation, and sprawling luxury, present a multitude of issues for modern Atlantans forced to navigate winding neighborhoods connected only by multi-lane highways.
Also, there's just some really interesting phenomena that if we talk specifically about Atlanta, Ponce de Leon, which is a primary artery that runs east-west, running basically to Decatur. One of the interesting phenomenons, if you look at maps of Atlanta, is roads that run north-south and cross over Ponce, they actually change names as they cross that road. So probably the best example of this is Briarcliff. So Briarcliff Road, which runs all the way up into kind of the Druid Hills area. As you follow it south where it intersects Ponce, south of Ponce, its name changes to Moreland. And part of the reason for this is wealthy white families who lived north of Ponce did not want to have the same street address as black families that lived south of Ponce.
A desire for segregation between white Atlantans and black Atlantans in the past has created consequences, turning Atlanta's roadways into a hellish maze of changing street names and winding streets. A uniquely American phenomenon that particularly impacts Atlanta is the Strode. Stroads combine streets, environments intended for pedestrian use, and storefronts and roads, which are intended for use by cars for efficient transportation and are especially common in suburban areas as a way to reckon between the need for car transport and a half-hearted desire for infrastructure for pedestrians. The result is inefficient roadways congested by bicycles, pedestrians, and cars, forced to navigate narrow roads and low speed limits. Overall, the Strode, a concept intended to optimize land space, results in inconvenient transportation for all parties and heightens dangers like collisions and pedestrian accidents. The prominence of this structure in Atlanta contributes to its modern transportation crisis in both urban and suburban areas. Even as housing prices continue to rise, Atlanta, its suburbs, and infrastructure continues to fall behind in comparison to that of other cities. For instance, the MARTA does not extend to areas in Cobb County and other suburbs, largely due to efforts in the 1970s to resist the expansion of their rail lines in order to avoid any connection to the largely minority communities in metropolitan Atlanta. In comparison to the comparable metro systems in cities like Boston and Washington, D.C., Atlanta's metro system is notably dirty, unsafe, and unreliable, failing to effectively connect Atlanta. The question now is, what does the future of Atlanta look like?
Definitely more walkable suburbs than Dunwoody. I think it really depends on where you live in Dunwoody. If you are very close to the village, then yeah, it is somewhat walkable. But if you're any distance from it, it's not the most walkable.
A car is prerequisite for effectively navigating the city and its suburbs, and even in this regard, Atlanta lacks efficient transportation routes. Atlanta's major highways like I-20 were constructed following World War II as a tool for segregating Atlanta. The highway served to divide white and black districts and was built by plowing through Atlanta's poorest neighborhoods. Notorious for its never-ending traffic jams, I-20 constantly ranks among the most dangerous roadways in the United States. For decades, Atlanta's suburbs have prioritized adding lanes and constructing new roads over building sidewalks and bike lanes. As a result, a simple walk to the grocery store or to school can take 40 minutes of walking on narrow sidewalks crammed next to 4-lane highways, if sidewalks are present at all. Even in the city, as of 2020, less than half of Atlanta's streets has sidewalks. As the suburban sprawl has spread from the center points of the city, the real estate pricing continues to skyrocket. Prices throughout the suburbs and metro Atlanta have become entirely unreasonable and unaffordable for the average person. Suburbs like Dunwoody are considered to be a seller's market, which means that there are more people looking to buy houses in Dunwoody rather than sell them. This high demand of houses then causes the prices to continuously increase. The median listing of housing for sale within Dunwoody, for instance, is $585,000, which is unattainable for the average American.
Affordable housing is essential to the vitality of the city. For one thing, it's the right thing to do, right? Because the people who made the Beltline possible and who made the city, the urban part of Atlanta, interesting all these years, most people can't afford the high prices that you see today. So as more people move into the city, that drives up the housing prices and pushes people out. And A, that's wrong. B, the city needs those people to stay in order to work in the stores and at the hospitals and in the office buildings and all of that. We need a rich diversity of people to make the city economically successful, vibrant, all of that.
Today, modern issues also manifest themselves in the form of conflicts over cityhood. Rather than remain associated within Atlanta, many wealthy neighborhoods are pursuing cityhood.
Hi. Jane Kennedy, and I've been here since 2005. I am retired, but I used to have my own business in Vinings, right a half a mile from here. I owned a Curves for Women. It's a franchise for women's fitness, and it was for women only, and it was a lot of fun, and I had it for 14 years.
Although Jane Kennedy is not personally involved in the Vinings cityhood movement, many in her community are. Here are the common arguments Kennedy hears from her pro-city friends and neighbors.
We have neighbors involved, and just like politics, we're on both sides of the fence. So everything else has been coming up for cityhood. Dunwoody came up for cityhood. Mapleton's come up for cityhood. Sloan has come up for cityhood. They just like to have their own government and feel like they're in charge. Like with the people in Buckhead wanting to have their own city, there's a lot of crime there. They feel they don't get the service. They have to pay taxes to both the city of Atlanta and Fulton County, so they're double taxed for everything they do. And they just want to trimline that and just have government for the services they use in their particular area, and they don't want to support all of the city of Atlanta and all of Fulton County.
Well, new at 5, the DeKalb County School District has filed a lawsuit against the city of Atlanta and its city council president. DeKalb County is upset over the annexation of Emory University, the CDC, and homes and businesses into Atlanta.
Well, as Metro Atlanta continues to grow, local cities are looking to expand. Both the cities of Clarkston and Brookhaven, they may actually absorb more of DeKalb County through annexation.
That's if the county doesn't put up a fight. CBS 46's Ashley Thompson spoke with representatives of both cities to learn more about their plans.
It appears that one movement is more government driven while the other is more commercial driven, but both cities may be growing in the near future.
Due to the vast differences between the suburbs and inner cities, there has been an increased effort in prosperous suburbs in an attempt to annex themselves from counties or districts.
A push to make Buckhead its own city is taking a step forward to becoming reality. But as Doug Richards reports, it comes with new criticism that this could strip assets from Atlanta at very low costs.
So imagine selling Chastain Park, one of the most valuable properties in the city of Atlanta, for pennies on the dollar. Critics say that's what would happen if Buckhead becomes its own.
However, what initially appear to be debates over property taxes and civil services have far deeper implications. The annexation of communities like Buckhead would overwhelmingly harm inner city Atlanta, as Buckhead currently compromises 40% of Atlanta's property assets.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Ever been to Buckhead in Atlanta? It's a beautiful residential, partly commercial neighborhood in the northwest corner of the city. It's not a huge place, fewer than 80,000 people live there, but it's fair to say that without Buckhead, Atlanta, at least as it's currently run, couldn't exist. Taxes from Buckhead residents account for fully a fifth of Atlanta's entire city budget. So you'd think the people who run the city would be very polite to Buckhead. They certainly should be. But the opposite is true.
Someone who used to live in one of those regions that there was a brief cityhood attempt. Not here in Dunwoody, but I used to live just outside of Decatur, and there was a brief cityhood attempt there. Not the city of Decatur itself, but outside of it. I definitely see why people are in favor of it. Like Dunwoody is obviously a very good example. I can't remember exactly how long ago it officially became a city. The benefits of that, of course, is you have a lot more local control. Over ordinances, over the construction of parks, about how money is spent. All of that is useful. The flip side is cityhood can reduce the ability of counties to be able to provide the services that are necessary because a greater tax revenue ends up going to the cities than it does to the counties.
Additionally, many pro-city advocates commonly use zoning as a part of their arguments, arguing that suburbs must declare cityhood in order to preserve zoning for single-family homes and avoid the construction of apartment and condo complexes. The desire to preserve the single-family unit at the expense of working-class families who require affordable housing emphasizes already existing class and race lines in Atlanta and its suburb, and would inevitably further the homogeneity of Atlanta's suburban communities. Zoning has been used throughout Atlanta's history as a tool for race and class segregation, as shown in the construction of I-20 and the explicit creation of white and colored districts.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, you can't talk about really anything in the physical construction of the city, land use, transportation, anything like that without talking about race. It is central to most of the decisions that have been made historically about that, including suburbanization. Suburbanization was largely, in its origin, was largely about white people leaving the city to escape.
As a city, we are stronger together. One city with one bright future. One city with one bright future.
The question now is, what does the future of Atlanta look like?
I studied architecture and urban planning at Georgia Tech. And my graduate thesis was the Atlanta Beltline. And that's a long story. I can tell you as much as you want about that. It's probably, I guess, one of my bigger professional accomplishments. I have a consulting practice now. I'm working on a project called the South River Forest with the Nature Conservancy. But I do a lot of, I work on a lot of big, like the Beltline, big kind of ambitious ideas about the future of cities that are usually pretty complicated in terms of degraded urban land, low-income communities of color, a lot of environmental justice issues, transportation, housing affordability, gentrification, those kinds of things.
what we're seeing happening is more and more communities are wanting to move away from the traditional suburban car-dominated model and move towards a more walking-friendly community. We see this happening in Roswell, even really like distant, almost like what you would call exurbs. Actually, just recently I was in Swanee over the weekend, and even a place like Swanee has developed like a downtown area that is designed for you to be able to park and walk to restaurants and shops and residences. So I think that's the direction that Dunwoody wants to go. And if you look at some of the proposals that have been made for the village, and to like remove a lot of the parking and instead make more walkable paths, I think that's the direction Dunwoody wants to go.
Ryan Gravel is one of the innovators pioneering the future of urban life, and his projects give a glimpse into what Atlanta and its suburbs may look like in the future. His work helps to illuminate how Atlanta may be able to move past its dark history.
The reality is that suburban landscapes in Atlanta and across the nation are, we're built with an assumption of prosperity, and suburbs like Dunwoody were certainly prosperous. In order to maintain that kind of prosperity, they have to adapt, and some communities are willing to adapt and open to that, and some are not. So Dunwoody's reasonably well positioned because it has access to MARTA, rail, and other kinds of investments. But I think the future for suburban areas generally will kind of run the gamut. It will be, some will remain, protect themselves with innovation, and some will not. So a lot of people from the suburbs come to the Beltline for work, for social life, evenings, certainly weekends, recreation. I know that because I live in a neighborhood and all the cars parked on the street for people going to the Beltline are from all over the region, which is exciting. I think people I think people enjoy coming to the Beltline to see, a different kind of way of life and understand, imagine what their own communities might look like. And so I know that a lot of suburban communities have taken ideas from the Beltline and then gone back to implement similar kinds of projects and policies in their own communities. Mostly trail projects, but other kinds of things as well.
Suburbs have seen an increasing effort in attempting to transition to walkable communities. A desire to connect with people in the community has sparked an increase in new projects similar to the Beltline. For example, a new development idea known as High Street is a new cosmopolitan city center for Atlanta city perimeter with active streets, unparalleled activity, unique shopping, experimental fine dining, and lively entertainment. High Street is able to connect two major cities of Dunwoody and Sandy Springs, allowing for a vibrant central location. The main amenity that it allows for a walkable community that challenges traditional suburban lifestyles and which normally require the use of an automobile.
And create connections. Okay, so if you're going to have these great spaces and these new developments, you want to be able to make sure people can walk there and move in a variety of manners. And so what you see here is, number one, a representation of more of a build out of a street grid network, creating redundancy in your transportation network. These are public spaces that can leverage. You can leverage it for stormwater. You can leverage for connectivity. Take advantage of. You can use it to help incentivize development. That's important. But also thinking about the extensive bicycle and roadway and pedestrian network. Obviously, you're looking at the kind of the Greenway plan right now, but all those ideas feed into this idea, especially what happens here. So again, this is a large area. So breaking it down to smaller nodes that people can connect to, really people will resonate with. And certainly this was a very popular idea. The other thing I want to
Along with High Street, another plan to develop more urban, walkable cities is the development of Edge City 2.0. Perimeter Center Future Plan, known as Edge City 2.0, is trying to achieve a cohesive community throughout Dunwoody. Primarily located in areas with eBay access to highways or the MARTA, the desire for a car decreases. Edge City 2.0 emphasizes future development opportunities in proximity to the Dunwoody MARTA station, with most development activity taking place at what is currently the Perimeter Mall site and adjacent properties. All throughout the Atlanta area, suburbs are taking steps to transform their communities into walkable escapes from city life. Suburbs are renovating their downtown areas to be more compact and lively, installing sidewalks and walking trails, and overall emphasizing ease and mobility. In comparison to the bleak, homogeneous communities of the past, there is a bright future in store for Atlanta's suburbs. There's hope for the future of Atlanta. We have the power to create change. If we as citizens take the steps to connect our community, both physically through infrastructure and socially through greater acceptance and equality, Atlanta can come to truly embrace its reputation as a diverse American powerhouse.